What's going on, everybody? This is JT here with JT Invests in You. And today we have a great guest for the channel. We have Abdul Ossman, who is the CEO of Algoracle. Algoracle is an Oracle service native to the Algorand blockchain. I think it's an incredible idea. It's absolutely what Algorand needs. And let's find out if Algoracle is going to become Algorand's Chainlink. All right. Welcome, Abdul. It's great to have you.
Thanks, JT. It's great to be here.
How you doing today?
Pretty good, pretty good. Uh,
Awesome.
mhm.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. And how about we just jump right into it?
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. So, Abdul, could you just give my audience a little bit of background on yourself and how you became involved in the blockchain space?
Sure. Yeah. So my background's in both kind of computer science and business management. And throughout my career, I kind of went between both sides with the project management and the software development. Lately, I've kind of been running my own organization, Gesick, and we take products from ideation all the way to kind of production, and then we help scale it. And so, kind of running my own development firm allowed me to spend about 40% on projects that are entrepreneurial in nature, things that we want to build, things that my team want to build. And then one of the things that kind of came out of that was a decentralized sportsbook. There's been a lot of issues in the sportsbook world because with the bookies and how they do things, it's really limiting. And so we thought having it decentralized could be better. And that's kind of how we decided, okay, let's build it on blockchain, did our research, found Algorand, and that's kind of how we got started specifically for blockchain.
Awesome. So that's kind of cool because I know a lot of people become interested in the blockchain space first and then would like to create on top of it. But it seemed like you just wanted to create the app and then found blockchain to be the easiest solution to do the app. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. We kind of work from a different perspective. We look at, okay, we want to build this product. We're in this market, and what are the pain points? And then we look at technology to help solve those pain points. And that's how we work with our clients. We don't look at the technology. We look at what we want to build, and then work our way back to the technology that's available.
Makes complete sense. And I just want to let the audience know, anyone that's listening and currently, if you have any questions, just leave them in the chat. I am paying attention to the chat, and we will go over those questions at the end. But so, could you explain what Algorical is? Am I pronouncing that right? It's kind of it's not the easiest to say.
Yeah, Algoracle. So it's
Perfect.
Algorand-based Oracle. Just cut out the middle part. So Algoracle simply does one thing. It gets data from external sources and puts it on chain. And it sounds simple, but it's a lot more complex than it sounds. But we're trying to remove that complexity. And just for people consuming those feeds and people looking at those feeds, you want them to just be able to get what they need, nice, hassle-free.
Now you touched on it a little bit in your opening statement, but why isn't Oracle so important for blockchain, and why does Algorand specifically need an Oracle?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a huge question, and the blockchain is only limited to what you can do on the blockchain. And a lot of times, you can make payments, you can enter into contracts as long as all the information you need is on the blockchain. But once you start looking at things such as pricing, whether it's stocks or exchanges or any sort of asset, you look at creating applications that depend on real world data, whether it's insurance or sports. You need some sort of connection to the outside world. Algorand is probably one of the better blockchains in terms of, technology-wise. You look at its competitors, and it's among the top when it comes to speed, cost. It's really, I think a lot of people agree that it's going to be one of the best to do decentralized finance on. But of course, you need an oracle for the chain to get big, and the chain can't get big without an oracle, so it's kind of a catch-22. But now that Algorand is nice and it's working, and it's been proven for several years, hasn't gone down for a single moment. It's proven that it's a heavyweight in that regard, and so now it just needs an oracle service to help it grow even bigger.
So I'm wondering, why did you decide to go with Algorand and not another blockchain that already had an Oracle in place? Like, why did you decide to make the extra route of building out an Oracle instead of just focusing on your app? Like, what drew you to wanting to do it on Algorand specifically?
Yeah, great question. So our eventually our consumers who will be, and again it goes back to what I was saying about we look at what we're trying to achieve first and then find the best technology to work with it. So if you're a consumer and you're using our decentralized sportsbook, for example, you're not going to care whether it's built on this way or it's built on that. You're going to care that it gives you the lowest price for what you're trying to do, period, and it works really fast. A lot of chains we looked at simply were not able to deliver on that. And so we didn't look at what blockchain has an Oracle or any of that. We just looked at which one's going to allow us to execute fastest, and then we tried to find out what they're missing. So we looked at Algorand. We noticed it's going to be really fast, really cheap to do, and we even looked at their language and we noticed it's going to be a bit of a learning curve, but it was going to be worth it. And so that's why we ultimately decided on Algorand, because you look a year from now, 2 years from now, the consumers are not going to care about the backend, and people are going to be choosing the blockchain they're building on based on business decisions.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah,
complete sense to
that's
me.
complete sense to me.
Oh, there's a little bit of
Oh,
an
there's a
echo.
little bit of an echo.
Not sure
Not sure
what's going on there. Just give me 1 second to figure that out. It
it
seems.
seems.
Oh,
Oh,
hold on
hold
one
on one
sec.
sec. Sure.
Is anybody in the chat hearing an echo? Could anybody let me know? It's so
So
strange.
strange.
All right. I'm still
I'm still
hearing
here.
it, and so are other people. I wonder why. You're not playing this in the background, are you?
Does it help if I mute? Does the echo?
Um, yeah, I'm not hearing the echo right now, so I guess it does. Awesome. Cool. All right. So now that we got that squared away, sorry about that, everybody. So what makes Algoracle different from other oracles such as Chainlink on Ethereum?
Okay, so that's a good question there. How's the echo sounding now?
They're saying good. Although
Okay. So,
we'll have to do the mute thing because I hear it now as I talk.
okay. Yeah, I'm just using my computer speakers, so that might be it. Chainlink works. I mean, the biggest difference obviously is they're not available on Algorand, period. But if you want me to elaborate further, Chainlink is a decentralized network of oracles. So, they have multiple different. So, for example, us, we run nodes, right? They have a network that runs nodes and a different network that runs nodes, and then the feeds feed in to this decentralized network. And Chainlink kind of controls a lot of what's going on in the ecosystem. They're the big player, and they have a lot of control over what happens and how it happens. We're taking a different approach. So in essence, it kind of works the same, right? You have a decentralized group of nodes, you have your feed providers, and they feed data in. So I'd say like 60, 70% is the same. But rather than having a decentralized group of nodes, we just have one large group of nodes. And then you have your data providers that feed into it. And I think that's, it's not much of a, because if you have a single source provider and that provider goes down, it doesn't matter about your node system. And so I think that's probably the biggest difference. Um, but most of it, I would say, is kind of similar to each other. But we don't really work. So once it's out there and it's launched, the goal is that everything works on its own, and we don't have to have much control. We're trying to create a self-sustaining economy where the fees paid by the applications using the system kind of go right to the node providers and the feed providers. And we want the system kind of to run itself and not have any sort of foundation interference, um, and be self-sustaining.
Makes sense, especially seeing how this isn't even your main project. It almost is the side project to get to the main project. So why would you want to be focusing all of your time on it? So turning it into a self-sustaining ecosystem makes absolute sense. One, from a decentralization standpoint, but two, from a practical sense for what you're trying to do ultimately. So, what type of data will Algoracle focus on at first, or what kind of feed providers will they seek out to have on their platform first?
Initially, and we've already kind of have cryptocurrency prices on there. I think that's one of the bigger needs. So right now we have the Algo USD price pair. You can actually go on the site and kind of see it doesn't look the greatest, but it's just that one pair. Eventually, we're going to launch with not just cryptocurrency prices, a few foreign exchange prices, and some sports data, of course. uh, Ultimately, we want any sort of numerical data to be able to be created by the feed, by the community. So if I want to come in and I want to say, I want to create a feed that tells me, the number of constellations in the night sky, I can do it. I can create that. I can request community members to start providing feeds for it. We can use the calculator on the site to determine what good deposits are, and then have those people start providing those feeds. And that's kind of the ultimate goal. It's possible probably to do text-based data, but text-based data tends to only be single source. So we're looking at ways to have some kind of single source data feeds that is going to be available, but that's more in the experimental phase, maybe phase 2, phase 3. Right now, it's going to be numerical data.
Now, how does somebody become a feed provider to Algoracle?
Great question. So we have a contact form, and we've had quite a few people, almost 100, over 100 people who submitted it. Many of them want to be feed providers. And so we can provide some coaching, we can provide some advice that, hey, you sign up with a kind of a source of data feed. You can find it wherever. Um, then create a REST-based API. So it does take a little bit of technical knowledge in that you have to install some libraries and format the data in a certain way so that when our nodes call it, it responds appropriately. So that's kind of the main way where you have the large uh, feed provider group. There are also specialized feed providers, and these are, for example, people who have exclusive data, you have people who have institutional grade data, and those feed providers might require nodes to have licenses towards them. So slightly different way, and that's kind of the really big guys. So those probably they can make the market. And if you look at feed providers being the heart of Algoracle, um, all their data is theirs, and so they can decide, okay, we only want to provide all their institutional grade data, so that might be a different feed. Then you might have feeds from people pulling from coin market caps, from 12 data, CoinGecko, and those can just sign up by going to the website, paying a deposit, inputting the URL endpoint that they have created based on the documentation, based on our help with them, and then just watch the money come in.
Awesome. So, how do we know if a feed provider's data is trustworthy and that they're giving reliable information?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that was the first thing we tried to solve. We have a couple mathematicians and statisticians on the team, and we looked at historical data over the last several years across many different cryptocurrency prices, across many different exchanges, and we compared what makes data good. We looked at is taking the median good? What about using the median absolute deviation? And I won't get into too much details. It is in part 2 of the white paper, which is you can request it through the website right now. But we did do a lot of mathematics on what makes that, and we came up with a pretty robust number. So that as long as the majority of feed providers are honest, the system will remain honest. And really, the only way to attack the system is to take over 60, 70, 80% of the feed providers and start to corrupt it that way. But then that's why we introduced the bounty hunters.
Of course, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Are there any penalties or anything for any malicious behavior or any really bad information?
Yeah, so before you can provide feeds, you do need to pay a deposit. And that deposit is based on the types of applications that would be using it. So if the applications that are going to be using it are very simple, they're not handling much, they're just displaying data, the stakes might be low. So your deposits will probably be low. But if they're kind of a lot bigger, holding a lot of value, total value locked really high, those demands are going to get a lot higher in terms of how much you need to deposit. And so the system can tell if you're off compared to honest feed providers, and then you will get slashed depending on how off you are. After a certain point, you might get penalized your entire stake. So that's why it's really important to ensure that the data you're providing is correct.
Awesome. So in some way, the deposit you're putting down, it's almost like a security deposit on a home that you're renting, and as long as everything is the way you agreed upon when the terms you agreed on, then your security deposit is intact and you get to leave with it in the end. But so that go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And if your system goes down and you're not reporting, or you're reporting null values, it won't penalize you because it's going to know that's invalid data. But it's that if you're providing incorrect data, that's when it's going to affect you.
Now, for the bounties that you had mentioned, is there a way for the community to also essentially like downvote information that they feel isn't trustworthy?
Yeah, and once we looked at the data, is we realized that hey, there's always going to be a way, and it's the same issue that actual blockchains have. It's called the 51% attack in a lot of blockchains. Is if you can get enough of the computing power, or enough of the stakes, you can actually take over that system. Obviously, that's going to devalue your currency, and that's why it doesn't really happen in practice. But even though we have seen it happen a few times, and so we realized that there's no real way to kind of make it 100% foolproof. And what we decided was that okay, so if somebody does try to take over the system in that manner, we'll have a final kind of safeguard, which is the bounty hunters, people who are always going to have eyes on the website saying, okay, this is a bad feed. So if you try to slowly take over those feeds, the penalty you'll face is going to be a lot higher, and it's going to be a lot faster because of those community members. And ultimately, we want it to be sort of like how people check their coin market cap every 10 seconds to see how their price is doing. It's probably going to be hopefully the same thing where people are just checking the Algoracle, see if there's any bad feed providers, and hopefully they can make a little bit of quick cash if they catch any bad ones.
Of course, a great incentive there to find bad actors before they get too big. So, how easy is it for someone to run a node for Algoracle?
It's going to be easy, I think. Most modern computers with like 16 gigabytes of RAM, Core i7 can run a node. You're going to want to have uptime, a certain amount of uptime, at least 90 something percent. So it may not make sense to run on your home computer. You might have maybe a Mac Mini that's always on, or you can have like a cloud server that's running. Um, so it's going to be really simple. The requirements, that I think the most important one is the availability. So pretty much in that sense, almost anybody can run a node and start making some rewards that way. There are going to be some institutional grade feed providers that we talked about who are going to be a lot more secretive about their data. They don't want anybody to be able to run it, so they're probably going to require licenses from node providers to be able to call their data providers, and that kind of restricts the number of people, and introduce another cost, but obviously the rewards will always make up for whatever licenses are required. And so they're probably going to have that extra licensing requirement.
That makes sense. So, what are the incentives for running a node?
So if you're running a node, you pay your deposit, same as the feed providers, and the deposit makes sure that you're not going to try to cheat the system, putting wrong values on there, so that you can kind of hack into a decentralized application who's using the Oracle feeds. So the incentives, on the other hand, is you get paid out in tokens. As every time you provide the right value, you get a certain reward, and those rewards are instant. Same with the feed providers; those rewards are automatically transferred into your wallet. They can be used right away, so there's no locking period for that. You can always leave the system and take your stake. You might have to wait an hour or two just to make sure that there's no kind of penalties coming. Once you've cleared that 2, 3 max hour waiting period, you can remove your funds. So no one's ever locked in. And then the rewards are always instant, so you can spend those while still providing that service to the network.
Awesome. So that brings me to the question about the token. What is the primary function of the Algorical token Gora?
Yeah, so as mentioned earlier, we're trying to create a self-sustaining economy. We're hoping that the Gora token is going to be key and central to that. Rewards are paid out in Gora. The goal is that you're going to pay a deposit, and you want your value of your deposit to at the very least stay the same or grow in value. And so we're hoping by getting such a wide range of feed providers, by getting such a wide range of node providers, we're incentivizing people to kind of stake their tokens and provide services to the industry or to the network so that their tokens can appreciate over time. And that's kind of how it's done. It's just used as a payment mechanism. Some feeds may require payment in token, other feeds may require payment in algos. I think that's we've been looking at that, um, the best way to do those. So we're leaning more towards applications paying in algos just to make things easier for them. But that's kind of a discussion we're having with the consulting firm working on this.
Awesome. So when when will the token launch take place, and how will the token launch happen? Will it be auction style? Will there be pre-sales?
That is we're working with Brightnode. They've been in this space for quite a while. We created our own tokenomics plan, and then we put that to the side and say, let's go out and work with a consulting firm who specializes in tokenomics. That way, we want to make sure we're getting it right for the long term. And so, a lot of that is still in the works. It's been over a month now that we've been kind of working on it. So once we have that report ready, we'll release it. But at this time, all those details are still under consideration.
I figured. I was hoping we could squeeze out a little bit of token information from you, but I totally understand. Uh, so, I mean, you might have just alluded to this, but does that mean you won't be able to describe too much how the tokenomics of the token would work at this time?
Yeah, like I said, we created ours, but we want to get a second opinion, and that's why we're working with Brightnode right now. They've gave us a couple of recommendations, but if I say anything right now, it might change, and so I don't want to kind of put ourselves in that hole. But ultimately, we're going to make it so that it's going to be self-sustaining over the long term, and that's really what we're trying to do. um, make it as decentralized as possible and make it as lucrative, hopefully, especially for the early uh, buyers.
Cool. So, when does Algoracle plan to go live on mainnet?
April's our latest buy date right now, hopefully sooner, but kind of by April is our goal, at the very least with cryptocurrency prices.
Now, what are the current hurdles in the way of going live?
Our team is in place. We've got the team. We've been talking to a lot of different data feed providers, and so once we built it, once we started having these conversations with the feed providers, we noticed what their concerns are. And for example, one thing they talked about was they want their data to be secure, and that's why we came up with the licensing. And so once we got that type of feedback, we're getting feedback as well now from the actual consumers, the applications that will be using our data, and we'll be working with them over the next month or so to make sure that the system works for them. Um, at the end of the day, they're going to be the biggest users. They're going to be powering the system, and so just making sure everything's right for them. Our team has grown. It was kind of tricky at first finding the right devs. I think Algorand is a very niche space right now in the software development industry, but we've got a couple key people. And I think now it's going to be the auditing. Generally, there's quite long wait lists, but we've been talking to different auditors, and it looks like we've been able to kind of get a slot sometime in March. And so I think as long as everything goes smoothly and there's no hiccups, there shouldn't be any major roadblocks that we foresee.
Will Algoracle be an open sourced project in the long run?
Yeah. Once we're live, once we've got cryptocurrency, once we've got a sports feed up and running, the goal is to make it open source.
Awesome. So I just have one final question on my list here. Anyone listening that has a question, just fill it out in the chat, and we will totally get to those questions. This last question is a little bit just more subjective, just kind of a personal question. But the Algoracle benefited from the Virtus Fund, the Oracle Super Grant, along with other support from the foundation. How helpful has this support been? And what would you say to aspiring builders out there that wish to get started building on Algorand?
Yeah, I think the more people on building on Algorand, the bigger the ecosystem is going to be. We want ultimately, it goes back to the whole internet thing. The internet grew big because it was only one thing where everybody was using it, right? Imagine there was 20 different internets. It would have taken much longer. So we want something like that. I think Algorand is the best chain, and the more people that build on Algorand, the more people that use Algorand, the more it gets adopted. And I think the foundation is doing great, trying to drive that adoption. And they've been very supportive, not just from the funding, but also from the developer resources that they have is absolutely incredible. The number of tutorials, the number of Discord channels and Telegrams that are available to developers. Even their forum has been great. And then there's also kind of not subsidiaries, but like uh, places like Encode, which run hackathons, which run accelerators, and there's all these types of support for developers in the ecosystem. And so I highly recommend. It's been a great experience building on Algorand so far. It's been a great experience working with the foundation and Encode Club. So I highly recommend.
That's great to hear, and I'm hoping somebody in the audience hears that and decides to build that project that I know they're thinking of right now, but are a little intimidated on the process. But let's move on to some of these chat questions. Right here we have Joe, and he asks, "Are there any partnerships with other Algorand projects in the works? Has any other Algorand app? Well, I'm sure there are some you can't say, but if there's any that you can say, are there any other projects that are working to integrate Algoracle when you go live?"
Yeah, so we're currently on closed testnet, and closed testnet just means that we're providing the feeds from certain data providers. We're running all the nodes internally just to spot the initial bugs, but we're working with actual projects. And I never thought of asking them if it's okay to say it, so I won't actually say who they are. But we've got at least 4 different providers, most of them on testnet and launching soon within the next month or two that are actively using our feeds. A few of them we work with in the accelerator, the Uncode Accelerator. A few of them have reached out to us, and we have a lot more to reach out to in our contact list. So yeah, we're working with other projects. I don't know if you would call that a partnership, but more of a supplier relationship, if that makes sense.
Makes complete sense to me. And then next up, we have John. And I don't understand the question completely because I'm not too familiar with Chainlink myself. However, will it be the same as Chainlink where providers sell the data for Link? As in, like, I think the token they meant.
Yeah. So the providers get Gora tokens for providing honest data. So in a
Okay.
way, you can say that, yeah, they're selling their data for the Gora token. The fees that are provided by the consumers will also go to the data providers. And it's going to be sort of an 80-20 split. 80% of kind of profits and money will be going to the data feed providers, and the rest will be going to the node runners.
Makes complete sense. The second part of his question is when token, but we already discussed that a little sooner. So if you missed that part, just rewind it when we post it. And let's see. Next for our questions, we have Eric, and he's saying, "Our team has been trying to get a hold of someone at Algoracle to ask more about your oracles. Who can we reach out to about this?"
Sure. So we had, I think it's over 200 contacts right now. We did not expect such a huge amount of messages, and our strategy at first was we were going to reach out to everybody individually, one by one. I think so far we've been reaching about 5 to 10 people per day, and as you can imagine, 200 people, it's going to take a few weeks to get to them. But if your question is urgent, I think if you jump on our Discord channel, you can DM me directly. You can message me on Twitter. That's at Osman 808. And or message the at Algoracle Twitter directly. Just feel free to DM. There's been a few people that have DM'd me, and that'll more or less put you to the top of that list.
Yeah, being a first mover in the space, I could imagine that there are quite a lot of messages you are getting. There aren't any other Oracle projects that I know of in the works, so I mean, there's not too much competition right now, and if anyone needs an Oracle, they will be messaging you for that service. Let's see. I think this might be the final question. If anyone has anything else, just throw it in there. But Nico asks, how is it more beneficial to use a native Oracle rather than a third-party Oracle like Chainlink?
Great question. I think using a native Oracle, all the Algorand standard assets will be on Algorand. It's going to be straightforward. We're designing it directly for Algorand. I'm not sure how you could use a third-party oracle like Chainlink right now on Algorand. If they made it available, that might be something we could talk about then. Ultimately, it's always, I think, in my opinion, good to have multiple sources of oracles for a single app. The bigger your app is, you probably want more than one source of an oracle. So I don't think there's ever a question of let's just have one oracle in the entire space. I think the more the better for the health of the entire ecosystem. And so, we're building directly for Algorand. The goal is to make it super fast. And so we've hyper focused on Algorand applications. And so how is it beneficial compared to Chainlink? We might have to do a little bit more research on that, but yeah.
I mean, I feel like one obvious answer would be at least if if an app was able to pull the information from Chainlink, and as you said, I'm not sure how they would do that on Algorand, it would be limited to the speeds of Ethereum, which, as of right now, that information could take a couple minutes, maybe even 10 minutes to get to you. Where on Algorand, that information could take, a couple seconds, maybe upwards of like 10, 15 seconds, depending on how long it takes to aggregate the information. But otherwise, it's a pretty quick process, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and if you look at the Algo USD price pair that's currently running, it's updating about every 15 to 20 seconds, and that's just because we haven't cracked it up all the way to the max. And I think every 10 seconds it's going to be push based, so you're going to have the data continually there rather than waiting for a price deviation, for example, or waiting for every few minutes. I think with Chainlink and the Ethereum, it's quite pricey, so you have to kind of wait until there's been a major enough change, which is I think 0.5%, or they do it every 5 minutes. I think I do wonder if Chainlink's reason not to come has been because Algorand does things so differently. I know they're on a lot of different EVM compatible chains, but Algorand is completely different. It's built from the ground up in a completely different manner than a lot of the other chains we looked at, and that's one of the reasons we chose it. Everything is an account. Everything, anything that works with accounts is a transaction, and there's only so much you can do, but you can add a lot of things together and make it quite powerful. But ultimately, it's you're working with accounts and transactions, and so Chainlink would probably have to do a lot of changing how they do things to make it work. And I suspect that's probably why they're not with Algorand yet. But I don't have too much insight into that, so I won't speak any more on that.
No, that makes sense. It does sometimes seem that the broader crypto community is kind of sleeping on Algorand, but uh, that's kind of beside the point. It does seem like we're wrapping up on our guest questions in the live chat. So, Abdul, is there anything that I didn't touch on, or the chat didn't touch on, that you want to mention to the audience today?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we covered most of it. I was just kind of here to answer some of those questions. And the community, the Algorand community, has been great. They really believe in their project. So I think it's different from other communities where sometimes they just care about the price, and obviously people care about the price here too, but they believe in the project as well. So it's been great, kind of working with the community and being part of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. The Algorand community is like no other. But yeah, that's one of the reasons I was completely excited to do this conversation, because the Oracle service that Chainlink provides to Ethereum, in my opinion, is one of the reasons Ethereum was able to take off the way it has. And I don't think Ethereum would be even close to as big as it was without some sort of Oracle service bringing data on chain. So this is a terrific project, and I really wish you a lot of success with it.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, JT. And when you look at the fact that Chainlink's spending millions of dollars in gas fees every year, I think there's a lot of efficiencies. And I know you said people are sleeping on Algorand. I think uh, institutional developers and governmental and big organizations see the value there, and I think they're building a lot of things on there. So I think the people who know the biggest developers are aware of it, and I think once it gets to a point where people are building on Chainlink for business reasons, and the person using it doesn't care which chain it's on, that they just care that it's decentralized and provides those benefits. Once people start choosing it for business reasons, we're going to see a lot different apps being built on Algorand.
I completely agree. Well, Abdul, this has been a terrific conversation. I appreciate you coming on the show. Could you just let my audience know where they could reach you? Any social medias, websites? I know you mentioned your Discord and Twitter earlier, but I'll just let you take the floor from here.
Yeah, so my Twitter is at Osman, which is my last name, Osman, 808 808s. You can also reach me. I do check out the at Algoracle quite often, so you can DM me there as well. The Discord that I mentioned, I can probably you can probably find the link in our Twitter bio. That might just be the easiest to remember at Algoracle. Feel free to send us a message if you go to algoracle.ai, hit the contact, and whether you want to be feed provider or if you just want to know when the Goro token is dropping and you just want to get the latest updates on that, feel free to fill out that contact form. We are reading every single message and getting back to everybody. So thank you for your patience.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. I Thanks so much for coming on the show, and thank you so much for sharing all of this information. I'm truly excited about this project, and I wish you the best.
Thanks you so much, JT. It's been amazing chatting with you.
Oh, somebody did just ask one last question. We did answer it, so I will just quickly say I can't pronounce this, but will you have a token? Just rewind this video when it posts in about 20 minutes. There will be a token, and you can learn all about it maybe 10 minutes prior to this point in this video. So awesome. I appreciate it. Take care, Abdul.
Bye, everybody.
Awesome. Have a good night. Well, everybody, I appreciate you all sticking to the end of the video. That was a great conversation with Abdul. I'm truly excited about this Oracle service. I think it's going to be one of the many things that really puts Algorand on the map. As he had said before, he was working on building out a sports betting or a sports betting tracking app. Wasn't exactly sure. And his issue was the fact that he ran into the problem of Algorand lacking in Oracle. So he was like, all right, I guess I'm going to have to pause this application and build out an Oracle. So I think this is absolutely genius. I'm glad that somebody or a team that won out at the Encode hackathon is building this out. And I really hope you enjoyed the content. So I will catch you all in the next interview. I have one in about 2 days with the people from Headlines, so be sure to subscribe to make sure you don't miss that. Awesome. Take care, everybody.